She spent her entire life protecting her body, as if guarding a dangerous secret. He built an empire dominating everything, except his own ghosts. When the silent virgin enters the world of the seductive millionaire, a game of power and desire begins. If you enjoy love and romance stories, watch until the end and you won't regret it. Subscribe to this channel and leave your comment telling us where you're listening to this beautiful story from. Let's continue. She was a woman fully formed yet never touched. At 27, Helen Vance carried her virginity like an inherited curse, not with pride, but with a ritualistic sense of protection, as if her body were a sealed reliquary, not by morals, but by pain. No one knew the reason for her silences, or the way she discreetly distanced herself whenever touch threatened to occur. Graduating in American literature, with a specialization in historical manuscripts and living an isolated life among forgotten documents, Helen now worked as a librarian in the restoration wing of the New York Public Library in New York City, where her routine unfolded between the quietude of yellowed pages and the suffocating heat of New Yorker summers. The invitation that changed everything arrived in a stamped envelope, with thick paper and an elegant signature. A private requisition to catalogue and restore the library of a historic mansion high up in Greenwich Village. The signature at the end sounded like an urban legend. Victor Davies, a reclusive businessman, heir to a tech empire embroiled in political and financial scandals, shrouded in shadows and speculation. Known for his coldness in business, his silent seduction at the rare social events he attended, and the emotional ruin of those who dared to approach him. A man accustomed to controlling everything, and everyone, from his penthouse overlooking the Hudson River. The salary offered was impossible to refuse for someone like Helen, who single-handedly supported her ailing grandmother in a cramped apartment in Brooklyn Heights. Her boss at the New York Public Library granted her 6 months' leave on the condition that she bring back reports on historical documents that might interest the public collection. But there was something in the letter's tone, in the way the words seemed surgically chosen, that made Helen uneasy. "It's a unique opportunity," commented Natalie, her only friend at work, as she helped Helen organize her restoration materials. "They say Davies has colonial-era documents no one has ever seen. Letters from the Irish court, manuscripts by authors thought to have left nothing. They also say he destroys everything he touches," Helen replied, carefully closing her toolkit. "Companies, competitors, women. But you're not like other women, are you?" Natalie smiled, a knowing smile. She was one of the few people who suspected Helen's secret, though they had never spoken openly about it. "You protect yourself with your books. You always have." Upon arriving at the mansion in Greenwich Village, Helen realized she wasn't facing an ordinary job. The place seemed suspended in time, an imposing 19th-century edifice that somehow resisted New York City's frantic modernity. From the top of that hill, one could see both the opulence of the Upper East Side and the precariousness of the shanty towns, a contrast as American as the mansion itself. With its Irish architecture, French details, and an English-inspired garden cultivated with tropical plants, the library was more a temple than an archive, a 2-story circular hall, mahogany shelves from floor to ceiling, a skylight filtering sunlight in golden beams. There were secret corridors, manuscripts in almost extinct languages, marginal annotations made by women who seemed to whisper from eternity. The scent of old paper mingled with that of freshly brewed coffee that an austere-looking lady, introduced only as Mrs. Eleanor, served Helen before leaving her alone to get acquainted with the place. And there, amidst the shadows of the place, he was, Victor, 43 years old, a man who exuded dominance not by what he said, but by what he didn't need to say. Tall, with black hair streaked with grey at the temples, olive skin, and eyes so dark brown they appeared black under certain lights. He was impeccably dressed in a light linen suit that contrasted with his tanned skin. "Miss Vance." He didn't ask, he stated, as if he already knew her. His voice was low, with a slight accent Helen couldn't immediately identify. "Welcome to the Davies Library. Mr. Davies." She nodded, maintaining the professional composure she had perfected over the years. "I appreciate the opportunity. Your collection seems remarkable." "It's more than remarkable." He approached, not invasively, but with a presence that seemed to occupy all the space between them. It's a collection of truths someone wanted to hide, of stories that shouldn't have been written, of confessions no one should have made. His eyes pierced her with surgical precision, as if he knew she hid not just an untouched body, but a chained soul. Isn't that what attracts bibliophiles like us, Miss Vance? The forbidden, the secret, the silenced. Helen felt a shiver run down her spine, not of fear, though there was something intimidating about Victor Davies. It was more like a recognition, as if he had just described not only his library but Helen herself. What attracts me, Mr. Davies, are the true stories, especially those that survive despite attempts to erase them. An almost imperceptible smile appeared on his face. Then we'll get along well, Miss Vance, because the truth is precisely what I've been looking for a long time. He gestured towards the shelves. Where do you want to start? From the beginning, she replied without hesitation. From the oldest documents. The foundational ones. He watched her for a moment as if evaluating not just her answer, but something deeper. Interesting choice. Most prefer to start with the most valuable pieces. Value isn't in the obvious, Mr. Davies. It's in the roots, in the secrets that underpin everything else. His smile widened minimally. As I said, we'll get along well. The game between them began in silence. He imposed rules. She pretended to accept them. She would stay in the mansion itself, in a suite on the second floor with a balcony opening onto the back garden. She would work alone without interference. She would receive instructions in writing, not verbal orders. Helen slept in a locked room, received notes instead of direct orders. Every approach was tense, measured, dangerous. Victor was rarely present during the day. He left early, returned late. When they met, it was always by chance, or at least he made it seem that way. An encounter on the staircase, a moment in the library after dinner, which they always ate separately. Helen at the kitchen table with Mrs. Eleanor, who revealed herself to be the housekeeper who had worked for the Davies family for decades. Victor in his office alone. During the first few weeks, Helen dedicated herself to work with her characteristic intensity. She catalogued manuscripts, organized correspondence, restored damaged pages. But she soon realized there was a pattern in that collection. Many documents seemed incomplete, as if parts had been deliberately removed. There were unanswered letters, diaries with torn pages, accounts that ended abruptly. And in many of these documents, one name recurred. Davies. Not just Victor, but generations of Davies who seemed to be involved in important events in American history, always in the shadows, always accumulating power without ever appearing in school textbooks. It was as if that family had written a parallel history of America. Seen through the cracks of power, one night, while working late, Helen found a letter dated 1945, written by a woman named Eliza Miller to a friend. In it, she spoke of her love for a man from the Davies family, August, and how this love was slowly destroying her. He has the gift of entering the soul, dear friend, and rewriting it to his liking. Before I realize it, I no longer know where my will ends and his desire begins. Helen felt a chill. Eliza's description of August Davies could easily apply to Victor. The same magnetic charm, the same ability to manipulate without seeming to manipulate. An interesting find. Victor's voice startled her. He was standing in the library doorway, holding a glass of red wine. He didn't enter, respecting her workspace, but his eyes focused on the letter in her hands. Just old correspondence, she replied, discreetly folding the letter. Nothing special. You're a terrible liar, Miss Vance. He took a sip of wine, his eyes never leaving hers. You found Eliza, didn't you? She was fascinating, like you. I'm not fascinating. Mr. Davies, I'm practical. Practicality is just the surface. Helen. It was the first time he had called her by her first name, and the sound of his voice pronouncing it felt like an unauthorized caress. The fascination is in what you hide, in the way you keep everyone at a safe distance. Helen swallowed hard, feeling strangely exposed. I'm not hiding anything. No? He raised an eyebrow, a gesture of challenge. Then why did your breathing change when I mentioned Eliza? Why did your fingers close protectively over the letter? Why did your eyes dart to the left as they always do when you lie? Are you watching me, Mr. Davies? Victor, he corrected. And yes, I am watching, just as you are watching me. It was true. In recent days, Helen had caught herself studying Victor with a curiosity that went beyond the professional. The way he moved, always with contained elegance. How he spoke, choosing each word as a jeweler chooses precious stones. How he always seemed distant even when physically close. "You are mistaken. I have no interest in—" "I didn't say you had interest," he interrupted softly. "I said you observe. As a precaution, perhaps. To keep yourself safe? To know the habits of the predator, who shares territory with you?" Helen felt her face flush. There was something disturbing in the precision with which he read her. "I don't consider you a predator, Mr. Davies." "Victor," he repeated. "And again you lie. But it's... all right. Fear is an intelligent response." He gestured towards the letter. Eliza was afraid too. With good reason. What happened to her? An enigmatic smile appeared on his face. "Continue your work, Helen. The answers are all here. You just need to know where to look." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Oh, and Helen? Lock your door tonight. Not because of me, but this place has ghosts." After he left, Helen remained motionless for a few moments, trying to process the conversation she had just had. Was there a veiled threat in his words? A warning? A provocation? Or simply the truth? She turned her attention back to Eliza's letter, rereading it more carefully. At the end there was an underlined sentence. "Remember, dear friend, that in this family, the walls have eyes and words have consequences." But within her a hunger grew, a thirst to be disarmed by someone who wouldn't diminish her, but would decipher her. And he, who had never respected emotional boundaries, for the first time found himself hesitant, restrained by an old fear, that of repeating the tragedy. The next morning, Helen found a new note on her desk, written in Victor's elegant handwriting. Some doors must remain closed, the east corridors especially, not by prohibition, but by protection. Naturally, the east corridor immediately became the place that most piqued Helen's interest. She avoided it for 2 days, trying to show that she respected the house rules. On the third day, however, curiosity won. Taking advantage of Victor's absence, and the moment Mrs. Eleanor was busy in the garden, she proceeded down the forbidden corridor. It was narrower than the others, with walls covered in family portraits. Generations of Davies watched her with eyes that seemed to follow her movements. At the end of the corridor, a single door remained closed, not locked. Helen noticed as she turned the knob, just closed, as if waiting for someone brave enough to open it. The room beyond the door was a feminine suite, preserved like a sanctuary. The bed was made with white cotton sheets, a dressing table with untouched beauty products, a closet with clothes that seemed frozen in time, women's garments from 10-15 years ago. On the walls, photographs of a beautiful, radiant young woman with the same dark eyes as Victor. In some photos, the two appeared together, always close, always complicit. On the nightstand, a book with a bookmark. Helen opened it carefully. It was an old edition of Moby Dick by Herman Melville. On the marked page, a sentence was highlighted. "All my means are sane, my motive and my object mad." Beneath the book, a leather-bound diary. Helen hesitated. Invading the room was already a transgression. Reading a personal diary would be crossing another line. But her librarian's fingers, accustomed to handling others' secrets with professional respect, had already touched the cover. "I knew you wouldn't resist." Helen froze. Victor was standing in the doorway, watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. It wasn't anger nor disappointment, but something more complex. Resignation, perhaps? "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have—" "No," he interrupted, entering the room slowly like one treading on sacred ground. "You shouldn't have, but I knew you would come. That's why I didn't lock the door." He picked up one of the photographs, observing it with a distant gaze. "Lucy, my sister. She's beautiful," Helen commented genuinely. "Was," he corrected. "Lucy died 12 years ago." Helen felt the weight of those words. "I'm so sorry. Everyone is sorry." His voice had a harshness she hadn't heard before. Everyone was sorry. For a while. Then they moved on with their lives. Only I remained trapped here in this room, in this guilt. Guilt? Victor replaced the photograph, adjusting it precisely to the same angle it had been before. A gesture of someone accustomed to keeping everything exactly as it should be. Lucy was 22 when she killed herself. He spoke bluntly, his eyes fixed on his sister's image. She hanged herself in a hotel in Chicago after a destructive relationship with a man I knew well. A man I brought into her life, Helen felt a knot in her throat. It wasn't your fault. No? He then stared at her, and there was an intensity in his gaze that made her take a step back. I introduced her to him. I'd brought him into our company. I ignored the signs that something was wrong. And when she finally came to me begging for help, do you know what I did? So I doubted her. I thought she was exaggerating. A week later, she was dead. The silence that followed was dense, almost palpable. Helen didn't know what to say. Any comfort would sound empty. Any attempt at absolution would be presumptuous. The diary, he indicated with a nod to the book she still held. It was hers. If you've come this far, if you've already crossed this line, then read it. Perhaps you'll understand what took me years to comprehend. I can't invade her privacy. She's dead, Helen. His voice was now a hoarse whisper. And in a way, so am I, for 12 years. But you... He watched her with an intensity that made her hold her breath. You are so alive it hurts to look. Like Lucy was. Victor approached, not menacingly, but with a presence that seemed to fill all the space between them. Do you know why I hired you, Helen? It wasn't for your impressive resume or recommendations. It was because, when I saw your photo in the selection process, I thought I'd seen a ghost. You could be Lucy's sister. The same look. The same way of protecting yourself from the world. As if carrying too heavy a secret. Helen swallowed hard. I'm not your sister, Mr. Davies. Victor, he corrected automatically. And no, you're not my sister. It's something more complex. He took the diary from her hands, opening it to a specific page. Read this, alone, and then if you still want to stay here, we'll talk. He left the room, leaving Helen alone with the open diary. On the indicated page, Lucy's delicate handwriting spoke of a man named Armand Léon, a university professor who had become her lover, her mentor, her tormentor. A man who seduced her not only physically, but psychologically, gradually isolating her from everyone she loved, especially her brother. Victor! He says my brother never truly loved me, Lucy had written. That Victor only keeps me close like a porcelain doll, a reminder of the family he never truly had. I'm starting to believe it. Why else would Victor be so protective, so controlling? Armand says I can be free. Free from him, free from Victor, free from this surname that is more a prison than a privilege. Helen closed the diary, feeling nauseous. Lucy's words echoed strangely familiar, as if she herself could have written them in another life. The isolation, the manipulation, the gradual erosion of trust in the people who truly cared. Returning to her room, Helen found another note on the bed. This time it wasn't Victor's elegant handwriting, but a more irregular, nervous script. Not all Davies are what they seem. Some keep secrets darker than old libraries. Ask about Angela Vance. Angela Vance, her mother's name, disappeared 20 years ago when Helen was only 7. A car accident in which the body was never found. Only the destroyed vehicle on a cliff on the road to upstate New York. Helen was raised by her maternal grandmother, with only photographs and fragmented stories about her mother. An investigative journalist who, according to her grandmother, tangled with dangerous people. How could anyone in that house know her mother's name? And why mention it now? A chill ran through her body. Suddenly the job, the mansion, Victor. Everything seemed part of a larger puzzle whose pieces had been scattered long before her arrival. That night, Helen couldn't sleep. She stared at the ornate ceiling of her room, feeling the weight of unspoken revelations, of still obscure connections. And for the first time in many years, she allowed herself to think about her own story. About the virginity she maintained not by religious or moral choice, but as a protective barrier, the last frontier no one had crossed, the last space that was exclusively hers. The next morning, Victor had already left when Helen came down for coffee. Mrs. Eleanor served strong coffee and still warm cheese bread, watching her with eyes that seemed to know more than they said. Mr. Victor left early. Meeting in Chicago, won't be back until tomorrow, the housekeeper informed her, placing homemade guava jelly on the table. Mrs. Eleanor, Helen began hesitantly, how long have you worked for the Davies family? The lady stopped what she was doing, wiping her hands on her apron. Since before Mr. Victor was born. I served his parents, God rest their souls. And before that my mother served his grandparents. So you knew Lucy. A flicker of pain passed through the housekeeper's eyes. Yes, I did. A beautiful girl. Cheerful as a bird until that man entered her life. Armand Léon. Mrs. Eleanor quickly made the sign of the cross. I don't like to speak that name in this house. It brings bad luck. He was a professor, wasn't he? Professor, the old lady snorted with contempt. He was a predator, that's what he was. He spoke beautifully, with that air of someone who knows things, but he had cold eyes like a snake. He deceived everyone, even Mr. Victor, who is not an easy man to deceive. Helen took a sip of coffee, pondering how to ask the next question. Mrs. Eleanor, by any chance, did you know a journalist named Angela Vance? The cup the housekeeper was holding slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. Her face visibly paled. Where did you hear that name? The woman's voice was little more than a whisper. Helen hesitated. She couldn't reveal the anonymous note. I found it in some documents in the library. Mrs. Eleanor bent down to collect the shards, her hands trembling. You shouldn't meddle in these matters, child. Some stories are best left buried. Please, Helen insisted. Angela Vance was my mother. The housekeeper froze, looking at her with a mixture of shock and something Helen couldn't identify. Fear, perhaps. Or pity? Your mother? Eleanor repeated, rising with difficulty. Jesus, Mary, Joseph. So that's why he brought you here. That's why... She didn't complete the sentence, bringing her hand to her mouth. What do you know about her? Nothing. The answer was too quick, defensive. I know nothing. And if you're smart, child, you'll pack your bags and leave this house today. With that, the housekeeper hurried out of the kitchen, leaving Helen alone with more questions than answers. What did her mother have to do with the Davies family? Why had the mere mention of her name caused such a reaction in Mrs. Eleanor? Determined to discover the truth, Helen returned to the library. If there were answers, they would be in the documents Victor valued so much and at the same time seemed to hide. She focused her search now not only on general cataloguing, but specifically on documents from the period her mother disappeared, 20 years ago. After hours of methodical searching, she found a folder labeled only with the date, 2003-2005. Inside, newspaper clippings, most about corruption scandals involving tech companies, high-ranking politicians and government contracts. Several of the articles bore Angela Vance's byline. Her mother had been an investigative reporter for New York City's leading newspaper, specializing in corruption exposés. One article stood out, Davies' Digital Empire Under Investigation, Links to Money Laundering and Bribery. The text, signed by Angela Vance, detailed how Victor's company, then managed by his father, was allegedly involved in a scheme to divert funds from government contracts through shell companies. Helen's heart raced. Her mother had investigated the Davies family. Would this explain the convenient accident, the absence of a body, the never-resolved case? At the bottom of the folder, something caught her eye, a black-and-white photograph taken at some social event. In it, a man Helen recognized as Victor's father, by the strong family resemblance, was talking to a young and beautiful woman, her mother. And in the background, partially out of focus but unmistakable, a young Victor Davies, probably in his early 20s, looking at Angela with an expression Helen couldn't decipher. Found what you were looking for? Helen almost screamed in surprise. In the library doorway stood a man she had never seen before, tall, slender, with neatly trimmed grey hair and light eyes that contrasted with his olive skin. He was elegantly but discreetly dressed, with a blazer over a shirt without a tie. There was something disturbingly familiar about him. Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you, he said, entering the library with the confidence of someone who knows the place well. I'm Armand Léon, Victor's former partner. You must be Helen Vance, the new librarian. Helen's blood ran cold. Armand Léon. The man who had seduced and manipulated Lucy to her tragic end. The man who, according to the diary, had isolated Victor's sister from her family. The man who should be... But you weren't... She began, unable to hide her confusion. Dead? He completed with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Victor would like that to be true, I imagine. No, just away from business for a while. Health issues, he gestured vaguely. But I'm back now. And you and I have a lot to talk about, Helen. She instinctively pressed the folder against her chest, as if trying to hide what she had just discovered. About what? About your mother, of course. His smile widened, revealing teeth that were too white, too perfect, and about how Victor Davies is directly responsible for her disappearance. Helen felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. The statement was so direct, so brutal, that she couldn't answer immediately. Part of her wanted to dismiss it as a lie, manipulation from the same man who had destroyed Lucy, but another part, the one that had grown up with the inexplicable, void left by her mother's disappearance, clung to the possibility of finally finding answers. "Why should I believe you?" she finally managed to say. "Because, unlike Victor, I have no reason to lie." Armand approached, stopping at a respectful distance, but his presence seemed to consume all the oxygen in the room. "He brought you here for a reason, Helen, and it's not for your skill with old books. What reason would that be?" "Guilt." He said the word like someone pronouncing a sentence. "Guilt for destroying your family, for ordering your mother's disappearance when she discovered too much about the Davies' dirty business." Helen shook her head, refusing to fully process what he was implying. "That's absurd. I would have been only 7 years old at the time. Why would he wait so long to—" "What, compensate me? Confess to me, because he only recently discovered who you are." Armand now circled the library, examining the books with casual interest, as if he weren't destroying Helen's world with every word. "Victor has always been meticulous. When your application for this job arrived, with your surname Vance, he must have been intrigued. He investigated, discovered the connection, and decided that bringing you into the web would be safer than leaving you out there, possibly discovering the truth by other means. That doesn't make sense." But even as she protested, pieces began to click into place in Helen's mind. The way Victor watched her, as if looking for something in her face. The comment about how she reminded him of Lucy, but also his hesitations, his sudden silences. "Still don't believe me?" Armand stopped in front of her. "Let's play fair then. Your mother didn't die in an accident. The car was found on the cliff, but no body, correct? Do you know why? Because there was no accident. Angela Vance was investigating how the Davies company laundered bribe money through overpriced technology purchases for public agencies. She had evidence, names, dates. She had enough to bring down not only the company, but half the government at the time." Helen felt a wave of nausea. "And you're telling me Victor killed her?" "I'm telling you Victor knows exactly what happened to her." Armand shrugged. "Whether he pulled the trigger or just gave the order, you'll have to ask him that. But believe me, he knows." A heavy silence fell between them. Helen tried to process everything she had heard, to separate truth from manipulation, to understand why this man, a predator by all accounts, would be revealing this to her. "Why are you telling me this? What do you gain from it?" Armand's smile changed, becoming almost melancholic. "Let's just say I owe a debt to Lucy, and to all the other women the Davies destroyed over the generations. Including yourself among the destroyers, I presume. I made mistakes, Helen." He didn't deny it. Terrible mistakes. "But unlike Victor, I acknowledge that. I'm trying to set things right in my own way. Coming out of the shadows to tell me a story without proof, trying to turn me against my employer with murder accusations. Proof?" He raised an eyebrow. "You are surrounded by proof. Why do you think Victor keeps this archive? For sentimental reasons?" He gestured broadly to the library. "This place is a confession in paper form, a museum of crimes. And you, my dear, are just the latest piece in the collection." With that, he walked to the door, but before leaving, he turned. "Oh, and one last thing. Ask Victor about your mother's ring. The sapphire ring she always wore. See his reaction." He smiled one last time. "I'll be around, Helen. When you're ready for the whole truth, find me." After he left, Helen remained motionless, still holding the folder with the newspaper clippings. Everything she thought she knew, about her mother, about this job, about Victor, now seemed distorted, seen through a blurred and broken pane of glass. Who was manipulating whom? Who was telling the truth, if anyone was? She turned her attention back to the photograph she had found. Her mother and Victor's father, conversing like acquaintances. And in the background, young Victor watching. What did that look mean? Was it the look of a future killer at his victim? Or was there something more, something Armand hadn't mentioned? Night fell over the mansion, bringing with it a tropical storm that shook the windows and made the old frames groan. Helen remained in the library, lost among documents, theories, and conflicting emotions. The sound of rain hammering against the roof was almost hypnotic, muffling everything except the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. That's when she heard it. A different sound, a creak on the floorboards. Someone was approaching. Instinctively, Helen hid the folder under other documents and picked up a random book, pretending to study it. Mrs. Eleanor appeared at the door, her face a mask of worry. "Child, it's past midnight. Mr. Victor just arrived earlier than expected because of the storm. Would you like me to serve you something before bed?" "No, thank you, Mrs. Eleanor." Helen forced a smile. "I'm just finishing organizing a few things." The housekeeper hesitated as if she wanted to say something more. Finally, in a low voice, "I saw Mr. Leon was here today." "Yes," Helen confirmed, studying the woman's reaction. "We had an interesting conversation." "Be careful with him, child." The warning was almost a whisper. "Honeyed tongue, bitter heart. You don't trust him. Not even the footprints he leaves." Mrs. Eleanor approached, looking nervously at the door as if fearing to be overheard. "He was the one who destroyed young Lucy. Don't believe anything he says." "And should I believe Victor? A man who hides so many secrets?" The old lady sighed heavily. "Everyone has secrets in this house, including me. Including you." She adjusted her shawl over her shoulders. "But not all secrets are evil. Some truths are hidden to protect, not to harm. Like what happened to my mother." Helen risked watching intently. The housekeeper's eyes widened. "So he told you," she murmured, more to herself. "Who told me?" "Armand, Victor, what do you know about my mother?" Mrs. Eleanor took a step back. "I shouldn't have said anything. It's not my place." She shook her head. "Sleep, child. Tomorrow will be another day." And with that, she hurried away, leaving Helen even more confused. Minutes later, as she was still trying to process that strange conversation, another presence made itself known at the library door. Victor Davies, wet from the rain, his damp hair falling over his forehead, his dark suit clinging to his body. There was something different in his expression, a vulnerability Helen hadn't seen before. "I heard you had visitors today," he said. Without preamble, "Your former partner?" "Yes." Helen decided that direct honesty was her best strategy now. He had interesting stories to tell. Victor entered the library, closing the door behind him. For the first time since Helen arrived, they were truly alone without the protective presence of Mrs. Eleanor, or the vastness of the house around them. Just the two of them, surrounded by books and secrets. Armand always had a gift for narrative. Victor spoke calmly, but Helen noticed how his fingers clenched tightly around an object in his pocket, especially when the story served his purposes. And what would his purposes be now? "To destroy me," as he has been trying to do for the past 15 years. He walked to the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. "What exactly did he tell you, Helen?" She hesitated. To reveal everything would be to show her hand too soon. To hide everything would be to lose the opportunity to provoke a revealing reaction. "He mentioned my mother." She watched intently. "Angela Vance." Victor stood completely still for a moment. When he turned, his face had taken on an expression Helen couldn't read. Pain? Guilt? Anger? What did he say about her? "That you know what happened to her. That it wasn't an accident." Helen took a step forward, defiant. "That you are responsible for her disappearance." A heavy silence fell between them, filled only by the sound of the storm outside. Victor kept his eyes fixed on hers, as if searching for something. "And you believed him?" It wasn't a question, but Helen answered anyway. "I don't know whom to believe. Everyone in this house seems to know more about my own mother than I do." Victor sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. "Angela Vance." He repeated the name like someone savoring a painful memory. Brilliant, determined, fearless. She was only 25 and already the best investigative reporter in New York City. "You knew her?" "Yes." The confirmation came without hesitation. "I knew her. Better than many. Armand said she was investigating your family. That she discovered things she shouldn't have." Victor nodded slowly. "That's true. She was investigating my father. Illicit operations, bribes, money laundering. The Davies empire always had its foundations in the mud, Helen. Angela was determined to expose it. And that's why she was eliminated?" Helen could barely pronounce the word. To her surprise, Victor laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "Is that what Armand told you? That I ordered her killed?" He shook his head. Typical of him. Her lie wrapped in half-truths is more convincing. "Then what is the truth?" Victor approached her, so close that Helen could smell the rain and expensive cologne emanating from him. From his pocket he took out a small shiny object, a ring with a sapphire stone, identical to the one her mother wore in the few photographs Helen kept. "The truth," he said, placing the ring in her palm, "is that your mother didn't die in that car. And I know that because I was the one who helped her disappear." Helen felt the world spin around her. The ring in her hand, her mother's ring, seemed to burn her skin with the weight of the revelation. "What? How?" "Angela discovered my father's crimes, yes. But what Armand didn't tell you is that I was helping her." Victor kept his eyes fixed on hers, each word measured. "My father was a monster, Helen. I grew up seeing what he did, not just in business, but to my mother, to the women who passed through that house. When I met Angela, I saw in her the chance to end all of it. How did you meet her? Did you seek her out?" "No." A sad smile appeared on his face. "She sought me out. Anonymously at first. Protected source, as you journalists say. We met in hidden cafes, exchanged documents in bookstores. I passed her information that would destroy my father without exposing myself directly." Helen struggled to absorb what she heard. "That doesn't explain why she disappeared, why I grew up without a mother." Victor's expression grew dark. "My father found out. Not about me, but about her investigation. He ordered Armand, his right-hand man at the time, to resolve the problem." He paused as if the next words were difficult to pronounce. "When I found out, I warned Angela. We planned everything in a few hours. The car on the cliff, false evidence, a new identity for her abroad. And me?" Helen's voice faltered. "Did she just abandon me?" "She wanted to take you." Victor lightly touched the ring in Helen's hand. "But I convinced her otherwise. It would be too dangerous for you. A child would attract attention. With your grandmother, you would be safe. The plan was that when the report was published and my father arrested, she would come back for you. But that never happened." "No." Victor looked away for the first time. "Because the report was never published. Because my father was never arrested. Because 3 days after Angela left the country, the newspaper's editor-in-chief was found dead. A convenient robbery. And a week later..." He paused. "My father suffered a sudden heart attack. He died before any charges could be formalized. And my mother, she remained hidden. It was too dangerous to return. Not just because of Armand, who took over the business with me, but because of the others involved in the scheme. Powerful politicians, businessmen, people who had a lot to lose. For 20 years. Helen couldn't hide the incredulity in her voice. "She left me for 20 years without a word, without a sign of life?" Victor seemed genuinely surprised. "She didn't make contact, never?" "Never?" Helen felt tears forming in her eyes. "I grew up believing she was dead." A heavy silence fell between them. Victor seemed to process that information, as if recalculating something in his mind. "That doesn't make sense," he murmured finally. "She assured me she kept in contact with your grandmother. Letters, news. My grandmother never mentioned any of that. Unless..." Victor visibly paled. "Unless she never reached her destination." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that perhaps Armand was more efficient than I imagined." Victor's voice now had a dark tone. "That perhaps he followed her. That perhaps she really is..." He didn't complete the sentence, but it wasn't necessary. Helen felt as if an abyss opened beneath her feet. Her mother could be dead after all. Not by Victor's order, but by trying to escape with his help. Why did you never investigate? Why did you never try to find out? "I tried." Victor seemed genuinely tormented now. "For years. I hired private investigators, bribed authorities. But it was as if she had evaporated. No trace, no clue. Eventually I concluded that she had succeeded. A new life, a new identity, so complete that even I couldn't find her." Helen closed her hand around the ring, feeling its metallic coldness against her skin. "And how did this end up with you?" "She left it with me the last time we saw each other. For me to keep until it was safe to return it. For me to give to you when the time came. And now is the time." Victor approached, his gaze intense. "Yes, because Armand is back. Because he discovered who you are. Because he wants to use you as he used Lucy, as he uses anyone who can hurt me." Helen tried to process everything. Each new revelation seemed more unbelievable than the last. Who was lying? Who was telling the truth? Or was it all a complex web of half-truths, where each person revealed only enough to serve their own interests? "Why should I believe you?" she finally asked. "How can I know you're not manipulating me too?" "You can't." The honesty in his answer surprised her. Just as you can't know if Armand is telling the truth, what you can do is seek your own answers. And that's why I brought you here, Helen. Not to use or manipulate you, but to give you access to everything, the files, the documents, the evidence, so that you can decide for yourself who is lying and who is telling the truth. He stepped back, walking to the door. Lucy's room will remain open for you, as will all the files in this house. Search, question, investigate. Your mother would have done the same. Before leaving, he turned one last time. And Helen, lock your door tonight. Armand knows how to enter this house as well as I do. She was alone again, the ring clutched in her hand, thousands of unanswered questions swirling in her mind. Who was Victor Davies, really? A manipulator trying to hide his crime? An ally who tried to protect her mother? Or something between these extremes? And, more importantly, what would she do with these revelations? Flee, as Mrs. Eleanor suggested? Continue, as her instinct as a daughter and investigator demanded? Looking at the ring that had belonged to her mother, Helen made her decision. She would stay. She would investigate. She would discover the truth no matter how painful, because that's what her mother would have done. Because that's what she herself needed to do to finally free herself from the past that had imprisoned her for so long. That night, she locked her bedroom door, as Victor suggested. But she didn't sleep. She spent hours examining the ring, trying to find some hidden message, some clue. It was a simple but elegant ring, an oval sapphire surrounded by small diamonds in white gold. Turning it against the light, she noticed something engraved on the inside. A date 12/05/97, May 1997. Helen did a quick calculation. She was born in February 1998. The date was approximately 9 months before her birth. A coincidence? Or something more? The storm outside finally abated, giving way to a steady drizzle. Helen approached the window, watching the garden occasionally illuminated by distant lightning. That's when she noticed a figure crossing the lawn towards the back of the mansion. A tall man, whom even at a distance she recognized as Armand Léon. What was he doing there at that hour? If Victor was right and he knew how to enter the house, why would he risk being outside in the rain? Driven by a curiosity that overcame fear, Helen grabbed a coat and left her room, moving silently through the mansion's corridors. The house was in complete silence. She descended the back staircase, the one used by the servants, and reached the kitchen. The door leading to the garden was unlocked. She hesitated for a moment. Going out now alone to follow a man who could be a murderer was madness. But standing still, accepting the half-truths offered to her, was also not an option. With a determined sigh, Helen opened the door and stepped out into the rainy night. The path Armand had taken led to an old building at the back of the property, what appeared to have been a caretaker's cottage, now practically swallowed by vegetation. The door was ajar, a faint yellowish light escaping through the cracks. Helen approached carefully, avoiding making noise. Through the fogged window, she could see Armand crouched before a kind of trapdoor in the floor. He opened the wooden door, revealing a dark space below, a basement or tunnel she couldn't distinguish clearly. With a flashlight in hand, he descended a rudimentary ladder and disappeared from view. She waited a few minutes, debating internally. Following Armand into that unknown place was too risky, but that could be the way to the answers she sought. Decided, she was preparing to enter the building when a strong hand grabbed her arm, pulling her back. Helen almost screamed, but another hand covered her mouth, silencing her. "Shh," a familiar voice whispered in her ear. "Victor, it's not safe." He pulled her away from the cabin, back to the relative shelter of the trees. When he finally released her, Helen turned furiously. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed. "He might know something about my mother." "He might kill you, that's what," Victor replied in the same low tone. "That tunnel leads to the catacombs under the property, a network of passages from the colonial period, when this area was a farm. Armand knows every inch of that labyrinth. You'd get lost in minutes. And how do you know I was here? Because I saw you from my window. Because I knew that, after our conversation, you would do exactly this, follow any clue, no matter how dangerous." There was a note of admiration in his voice, as if Helen's determined impulsiveness was something he respected, even if he disapproved. "Like your mother," he added, more softly. Helen felt a pang in her chest hearing that. "Tell me about her," she pleaded, almost begging. Not just about what she did, but who she was. Victor looked at the cabin. where Armand had disappeared, then back at Helen. The rain fell on them, but neither seemed to notice. "Not here," he said finally. "Let's go back to the house. There's something I need to show you." Back at the mansion, drenched and trembling slightly, Victor led Helen not to the library or her suite, but to his own office, a room she had never entered before. It was a sober, masculine environment, with dark, heavy furniture, shelves with business and law books, a large, solid wood desk. It seemed like the kind of place where important decisions were made, contracts signed, destinies sealed. Victor opened a safe hidden behind a painting, a cliché, Helen thought, but effective. From inside, he retrieved a carved wooden box which he placed on the desk. "Angela left this with me, for me to give to you when it was safe. When you were old enough to understand." Helen looked at the box, her heart racing. Inside, there were pieces of her mother's story, answers to questions she had carried all her life. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside the box were several letters, some photographs, a small green leather-bound diary, and an envelope sealed with red wax, on which was written in elegant script, "For my daughter, Helen, when she is able to understand." Helen looked at Victor, hesitant. "I won't open this in front of you," she said. "Nor did I expect you to." He walked to the door. "Take it to your room. Read it calmly." "They are her words, not mine." He paused at the threshold. "Just one thing, Helen. Whatever you discover in these letters, remember that your mother made the decisions she believed were best to protect you. Don't judge her without understanding the context in which she lived." With that, he left, leaving her alone with her mother's legacy. Helen took the box and returned to her room, locking the door behind her. She sat on the bed, her hands still trembling, and began with the sealed envelope. The letter inside was long, handwritten on paper that was already yellowing at the edges. The handwriting was firm, determined, as Helen imagined her mother would be. "My dearest daughter, if you are reading this, it means I am truly the worst mother in the world, one who abandoned her daughter for so long that she had to leave a letter to explain her reasons. Or else it means I am dead, and in that case, forgive me for not being able to return to you as I promised. You must have so many questions. Why did I disappear? Why did I leave you? Why did I never send news? I will try to answer as honestly as possible, although I know that no explanation will be enough to compensate for the years we lost. When you were born, I was 25 years old. I was ambitious, idealistic. I thought I could change the world with my reports. And then, investigating corruption schemes, I met the Davies family. First as a source, then as enemies, and finally, well, it's complicated. Victor's father, Theodore Davies, was a powerful and cruel man, the kind of man who would not hesitate to eliminate any obstacle in his path. When I started gathering evidence against him, I already knew the risk I was taking. What I didn't know was that his son, Victor, was willing to betray his own father to stop him. Victor sought me out. He provided me with documents, recordings, evidence I could never have obtained on my own. We worked together for months, building the case that would put Theodore Davies behind bars for decades. And in that process, we grew close, more than we should have, more than would be ethical or prudent. Helen, there's no delicate way to say this, so I'll be direct. Victor Davies is your biological father. It happened during those intense months of investigation. It wasn't a planned romance. It was something that simply happened, between two frightened, determined people, staking their lives on a cause that seemed bigger than ourselves. When I discovered the pregnancy, we were already drifting apart. The investigation was reaching its final stages. The danger was increasing. Victor wanted me to stop everything, the pregnancy, the investigation. He said it was too dangerous, that his father would not hesitate to kill me and the child if he knew. But I couldn't abandon years of work, and I definitely couldn't give up on you. We separated. He returned to his father's circle to continue providing information from within. I continued the pregnancy in secret, relying only on the support of my mother, your grandmother. When you were born, I was already practically isolated. There were threats, constant surveillance. But still, I continued gathering evidence. That's when everything fell apart. Theodore found out about the investigation. Not about Victor, fortunately, but about me. He ordered my elimination. Victor warned me with just a few hours' notice. We had a contingency plan. Fake my death, send me abroad with a new identity, publish the report once I was safe. The hardest part was deciding about you. Taking you with me would put you at risk. 2 people are easier to track than 1. A child attracts attention, and if something happened to me during the escape, you would be helpless in a foreign country. Leaving you with your grandmother seemed the only safe option, however painful. The plan was that once the report was published and Theodore arrested, I would return for you. Weeks, perhaps months of separation, no more than that. But something went wrong. Very wrong. I arrived in Ireland as planned. I had a safe apartment, new documents, enough money. The report was ready for publication. And then I received the news. My editor had been murdered. Days later, Theodore suffered a fatal heart attack. The report was never published. The evidence never came to light, and I was stuck in limbo, unable to return, because the others involved in the scheme, politicians, businessmen, Armand Léon himself, still had an interest in silencing me. Unable to move on completely, because you were in America. I kept in touch with your grandmother through letters sent by intermediaries. I received news of you, photographs, reports on your development, your tastes, your achievements at school. I planned to return many times, but new threats, new complications always arose. Years passed like this, with you growing up far from me while I became more and more a stranger in your life. I don't expect your forgiveness, Helen. I know I caused you irreparable pain. But I want you to know that there wasn't a single day when I didn't think of you, when I didn't plan our reunion. If you are reading this, and Victor has kept his promise to give you these letters, it means he believes it is now safe, or else that something happened to me and he thought you deserved to know the truth. In any case, there is something I need you to know about Victor. He is not the monster many think. He is a complex man with many shadows, but also with a light that few know. He saved me, Helen. And more importantly, he loved you from the first moment he knew of your existence, even though he was never allowed to approach. The sapphire ring I left with him, the same one you must have received now, was a gift from him when he found out about the pregnancy. He engraved the date we met on the inside. It was meant to be passed to you on your 18th birthday, along with the truth about your origin. If that didn't happen, there were reasons I don't know. My daughter, I don't know where or how you are now. I don't know what kind of woman you have become, but I know you have my determination and your father's intelligence. Use both wisely. And remember, sometimes the truth is not in grand revelations, but in small details in the subtext, in what is not said. With all my love, even from a distance, your mother, Angela. Helen let the letter fall into her lap, tears streaming freely down her face. Victor was her father. Victor Davies, the man she had been fearing and simultaneously, for whom she had felt an inexplicable attraction, was her biological father. A wave of nausea washed over her. What had she felt for him in recent days? That tension, that curiosity, that magnetism. Had it been a filial attraction disguised as something more? Or worse, had it been a genuine attraction to someone who shared her blood? The idea made her dizzy. She took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. Victor had never given any indication that he was her father. On the contrary, there were times when she could have sworn he looked at her with an interest that went beyond the paternal. Was he hiding the truth, or was it possible that he himself didn't know? She returned to the box, examining the other letters. Most were from Angela to her grandmother, letters that apparently had never been delivered. In all of them, her mother asked about Helen, requested photos, details about her growth, her tastes, her achievements at school. All expressed the desire to return, to reunite with her daughter, always postponed by new obstacles. The photographs showed Angela in different places: Dublin, Edinburgh, London. Always alone, always with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. In some, Helen noticed the sapphire ring on her hand. Finally, she opened the diary. It dated from the period of her pregnancy and the first months after her birth. In it, Angela detailed not only the investigation into the Davies, but also her conflicting feelings for Victor, the discovery of the pregnancy, the fear and joy of becoming a mother in such complex circumstances. One entry in particular caught her attention. January 15th, 1998. Victor came to visit me today. It was reckless. He could have been followed, discovered. But he needed to see his daughter, he said. He needed to be sure we were all right. He held Helen in his arms for almost an hour, looking at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. She has your eyes, he said. And it was true. But she has his chin, his forehead, that same intense gaze that seems to see through people. He wanted to register her, give her his surname. We argued. It would be too dangerous, I explained. If Theodore discovered he had a granddaughter, an unrecognized heir, he would not hesitate to eliminate the threat. Victor reluctantly agreed. Helen would remain a Vance, at least for now. Before leaving, he left an envelope with money I refused, and the sapphire ring he gave me when he found out about the pregnancy. For her to wear when she's older, he said. So she has something from both of us. It was the last time I saw him. The next day the news arrived. Someone leaked information about the investigation. Theodore knows. It's only a matter of time before they come after me. The escape plan needs to be accelerated. Helen closed the diary, feeling the weight of the revelations. Victor not only knew he was her father, he had met her as a baby. He had wanted to acknowledge her. And then, what happened? Why, when he brought her to work in his house 27 years later, had he not revealed the truth immediately? A disturbing thought arose. What if her mother's letter was wrong? What if Victor wasn't really the complex but fundamentally good man Angela described? What if he had brought her here not out of paternal feeling, but for some more sinister reason? And Armand, what did he know? Was he aware that she was Victor's daughter? Was that the reason for his sudden interest? Helen spent the night awake, rereading the letters, examining the photographs, trying to find clues, inconsistencies, anything that might indicate the absolute truth amidst that labyrinth of partial revelations. When the sun rose, she had made a decision. She would confront Victor directly. She would demand the whole truth, no more crumbs of information, no more half-revelations, but the complete story. She went down for coffee, determined, expecting to find him. But only Mrs. Eleanor was in the kitchen, setting the table with her usual silent efficiency. Mr. Victor left very early, the housekeeper informed her, even before Helen asked. He said he had urgent matters to resolve in Chicago. He'll be back tonight. Helen felt frustration and relief at the same time. Frustration at having to postpone the confrontation. Relief at having a few more hours to process everything she had discovered. Mrs. Eleanor, she began, observing the old lady with new eyes. How long have you worked for the Davies again? Almost 50 years, child. Since the late Theodore married Mrs. Cecilia, Mr. Victor's mother. So you knew my mother. Angela Vance. The housekeeper stopped what she was doing, turning slowly to Helen. There was no surprise on her face, only resigned sadness. So he told you. He gave me her letters, Helen confirmed. And yes, I know Victor is my biological father. Mrs. Eleanor sighed deeply, sitting at the table as if she suddenly felt the weight of all her years. Your mother was quite a woman. Brave like few others. Beautiful too, like you, she smiled sadly. Mr. Victor fell in love with her the instant he saw her, even knowing he shouldn't, that it was too complicated. Did you know about the investigation? About Theodore Davies's crimes? Child, in this house the walls have ears. Of course I knew. Just as I knew Mr. Victor was helping your mother against his own father. She shook her head. I never saw anything like it. The way he looked at her. It was as if he had found something he had been looking for his whole life. But he didn't tell me, Helen said, still struggling to understand. He brought me to this house, let me work with documents that could reveal everything, but never told me who I really was to him. Because he was afraid, Mrs. Eleanor explained simply. Afraid you would hate him, that you would blame him for never being present, that you would think he had abandoned you and your mother. She took Helen's hand in hers. And also afraid Armand would find out, because if there's one person who cannot know you are Mr. Victor's daughter, it's Armand Léon. Why? Because, child, 20 years ago Armand swore to destroy everything Mr. Victor loves. And if he discovers you are his daughter— She didn't complete the sentence, but the fear in her eyes said it all. What happened between them? Why so much hatred? Armand was old Theodore's right-hand man. He thought that when the old man died, he would take over the business with Victor. But your mother discovered that it was Armand who operated the dirtiest schemes, not just corruption, but smuggling, much worse crimes. When the old man died, Victor used that information to remove Armand from the company, almost handed him over to the police. It was only because of his political influence that he managed to escape prison. And then, He disappeared for a while. They say he was abroad. Others, that he was admitted to psychiatric clinics. What I know is that when he returned, he had an obsession to prove that Victor was no better than his father, to destroy his reputation, his business, his life. She squeezed Helen's hand. He was the one who destroyed young Lucy. Not directly, but he manipulated her against her brother. Do you understand why Mr. Victor is so afraid? Helen nodded slowly. The pieces were beginning to fit. Victor had brought her close not only because she was his daughter, but to protect her from Armand, who could have discovered her anyway. He was trying to control the situation, to maintain control over how and when the truth would be revealed. And my mother? What really happened to her? Victor said he helped her escape, but that's true, Mrs. Eleanor confirmed. I saw it with my own eyes. He took her in the middle of the night in his own car. He came back hours later alone with a look. I'll never forget that look. As if he had lost a part of his soul. He loved her, Helen concluded more to herself, as he never loved anyone, neither before nor after. And she? Did she love him too? Mrs. Eleanor smiled sadly. Your mother was complicated, child, divided between her sense of justice and her feelings. She loved him, yes, but she also blamed him for being the son of who he was, for not having denounced his father sooner, over being part of the system she fought so hard against. Helen remained silent, absorbing everything. Her mother and Victor, a love born in impossible circumstances, a love that produced a daughter, but that was destroyed by the same forces that initially united them. There's one more thing you should know, Mrs. Eleanor said after a moment. About your mother. Helen looked up, apprehensive. What? Mr. Victor never stopped looking for her, never. He hired detectives, international agencies, spent fortunes. For 15 years non-stop. Until 5 years ago. She hesitated. What happened 5 years ago? They found something. Off the coast of Ireland, remains. Identified as Angela Vance's. DNA confirmed. Your father, Mr. Victor, was devastated. That's when he started drinking more, isolating himself. When the businesses began to suffer, Helen felt as if the ground disappeared beneath her feet. My mother is dead? Are you sure? Absolutely not. The body was in bad condition, but the belongings found with it, the DNA, Mr. Victor had no doubts. And he didn't tell me, nor you, nor my grandmother. Your grandmother knew. She received the official news. As for me, it wasn't my place to tell. And Mr. Victor, she sighed, I think he wanted to spare you that pain until he was absolutely sure. Helen stood up abruptly. I need to be alone. She spent the day in the library, immersed in documents she now saw with different eyes. They were not just part of a job, but pieces of her own history, of the drama that had defined her life even before she was born. She found more articles written by her mother, reports on Theodore Davies's criminal activities, documents proving Armand Léon's involvement in the most violent schemes, and then, in an unlabeled folder, she found something that made her freeze, a series of private investigator reports, dated from the last 5 years, all about the same person, herself. Helen Vance, photos of her at university, reports on her academic performance, details about her personal life, her few relationships, all failed before they became too intimate. Victor had been monitoring her for years, not just in recent months, but for years. The feeling of violation was immediate and intense. As much as she could justify it as the distant care of a father, something about that secret surveillance disgusted her. It was control, not protection. It was obsession, not paternal love. As she absorbed the impact of that discovery, she heard the library door open. She turned, expecting to see Victor or Mrs. Eleanor, but who entered was Armand Léon with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Discovering family secrets, Helen? She immediately stood up, placing the table between them. What are you doing here? How did you get in? I already told you. I know this house as well as Victor, better in some aspects, especially its secret passages. He approached, looking at the documents scattered on the table. I see you found the surveillance reports. Disturbing, isn't it? To be watched for years without your knowledge or consent. What do you want? The same thing I've always wanted, justice, truth, revenge, perhaps. He shrugged casually. Victor Davies is not the man you think he is, Helen. He's not a benefactor nor a protector. He's a predator like his father. I know more than you imagine, she replied, keeping her voice firm despite her fear. I know about you and Theodore. I know you were the one who operated the dirtiest schemes. Armand laughed, a cold, humorless sound. Victor has always been good at rewriting history, at positioning himself as the reluctant hero, the man who had to make difficult choices. He picked up one of the reports, leafing through it distractedly. Did you ask him about what happened to your mother? To Angela? He helped her escape, Helen replied, hating how her voice trembled slightly. He protected her from his father, from you. Is that what he told you? Armand shook his head, like a professor disappointed with a student. Angela died 5 years ago, Helen. Her body was found on the Irish coast. Do you know who was in Ireland the same week? Victor. Helen felt a chill. That proves nothing. No? And what proves anything to you? The reports showing that he monitored you for years, like a predator watching its prey. The fact that he brought you to this house under false pretenses. Or perhaps, he paused dramatically, the fact that he looks at you the same way he looked at Lucy. What are you talking about? Victor had a special relationship with his sister. Obsessive, possessive. That's why I tried to help her escape. He couldn't stand the idea of losing her to another man. Armand now watched her intently, looking for signs that his words were having an effect. Just as he can't stand the idea of losing you now. He's my father, Helen said, the words escaping before she could contain them. She immediately regretted it, seeing the genuine shock on Armand's face. Your father? He repeated, an expression of disbelief giving way to something more calculating. Angela and Victor. Of course. Now everything makes sense. A slow smile spread across his face. Oh, Helen, this is even more disturbing than I imagined. What are you talking about? The way he looks at you. The way he watches you when he thinks no one is seeing. That's not the look of a father at a daughter, Helen. It's the look of a man at a woman. The same look he had for Lucy. Helen felt nauseous. You're lying. Trying to manipulate me. Am I? Then why didn't he tell you immediately who you were to him? Why all this game, this charade? Why bring you to this house, keep you close, watch you day after day? Armand moved closer. Because he doesn't see you as a daughter, Helen. Never did. To him, you're just another obsession. Another woman to possess, control break. Get out of here, Helen ordered, her voice firmer than she felt. Now or I'll call the police. Armand raised his hands in surrender, but his smile remained. As you wish. I've said what I needed to say. He walked to the door, but before leaving, he turned one last time. Just a piece of advice, lock your door tonight. Not because of me, but because of him. And remember, Victor Davies never let anyone leave him, neither your mother, nor Lucy, nor you. After he left, Helen remained trembling, feeling as if the ground beneath her feet was made of quicksand. What was true? What was false? Who was manipulating whom? The surveillance reports were disturbing, no doubt, but they only proved that Victor had monitored her, not his intentions in doing so. Armand's insinuations about Victor and Lucy were horrible, but they came from a man who, by all accounts, had psychologically destroyed the young woman. And yet, there was something in Armand's reaction when he learned she was Victor's daughter, something genuinely shocked, as if this possibility had never occurred to him. If he were just lying, wouldn't he have incorporated this new information into his narrative so quickly? The sound of a car arriving pulled her from her thoughts. Victor was back. In a few minutes he would be there, and she would have to confront him with everything she had discovered, with all of Armand's accusations. Helen took a deep breath, organizing the documents in her mind. She waited in the library, determined not to let herself be manipulated again, neither by Victor nor by Armand, nor by her own conflicting emotions. When the door opened and Victor entered, she immediately noticed that something was wrong. He looked exhausted, tense, with deep dark circles under his eyes and a pale face. Helen, he said, his tone of voice revealing surprise and something more, alarm. Armand was here, it wasn't a question. How do you know? Mrs. Eleanor saw him leaving. Did he hurt you? Threaten you? The concern in his voice seemed genuine. Not physically. She indicated the reports on the table. But I found this. And yes, we talked. He had a lot to say about you. Victor looked at the documents, then back at her. Something in his gaze changed. There were no more secrets to hide. You read your mother's letters, he concluded. You know who I am. I know you are my biological father, yes. What I don't know is why you brought me to this house without telling me. Why you monitored me for years in secret. Why you lied about so many things. Victor walked to the window, running a hand through his hair in a tired gesture. When he turned to her again, he looked older, more vulnerable. That's not how I planned for you to find out. He indicated a chair. May I? Helen nodded, remaining standing. He sat down heavily. I searched for Angela for 15 years, he began, without success. It was as if she had completely disappeared. Then 5 years ago, a fisherman found remains on an isolated beach in Ireland. Belongings, false documents, but which we could identify as hers. A DNA test confirmed. Mrs. Eleanor told me. What you didn't tell me was that you were in Ireland the same week. A shadow passed over Victor's face. Armand mentioned that, I presume. What he didn't mention was that I was there precisely because we received the news about the body. I went personally to identify what had been found, to be sure. And you were? As sure as possible under those circumstances. His voice faltered slightly. It was devastating. Not just losing hope of finding her alive, but realizing I would never know exactly what happened. Whether it was an accident, suicide, or murder, Helen completed for him. Yes? Victor watched her intently. That's when I started looking for you. Your grandmother had passed away the year before. You were at university studying literature, living your life. I hired people to monitor you, yes. To protect you, or to watch me, she challenged. To control every aspect of my life, as you did with Lucy. Something darkened in Victor's gaze. What did Armand tell you about Lucy? That you had an inappropriate relationship. Obsessive. That you couldn't stand the idea of losing her to another man. A bitter laugh escaped him. Of course he would say that. The same lie he used to poison Lucy against me. To isolate her, to convince her that I was the villain in the story, not him. And what is the truth? The truth is that Lucy was devastated after our father's death, vulnerable, looking for someone to guide her, to fill the void. And Armand, with his professorial charm, his manipulative intelligence, saw the perfect opportunity. Not just to get to her, but to hurt me through her. How? Lucy was a shareholder in the company. She wasn't interested in business, she left everything in my hands. Armand manipulated her to question my decisions, to distrust me. At the same time, he isolated her from friends, from therapists, from anyone who could help her see what was happening. Victor stood up, walking to the nearest bookshelf, where he pulled out an apparently random book. From inside he removed some folded sheets. Lucy's diary, the last pages which she tore out and hid before he couldn't complete the sentence. Read them yourself. Helen took the pages with trembling hands. The handwriting was irregular, almost frantic, very different from the beginning of the diary she had seen before. He lies, always lied. He says he loves me, but I see now that I'm just a pawn in his game against Victor, a means to an end. When confronted, his mask falls. I saw the coldness in his eyes, the cruelty. How could I have been so blind? Victor tried to warn me, but I pushed him away. I accused him of the terrible things Armand planted in my mind, and now it's too late. He said that if I leave him, he will destroy not only me, but Victor too, that he has proof that can ruin us. I don't know what to do. I see no way out. Forgive me, brother. Forgive me for not believing you when there was still time. Helen felt a knot in her throat. The words were those of someone desperate, cornered, hopeless. I found this too late, Victor said, his voice choked. The next morning she had already... He couldn't finish. My fault was not insisting more. Not breaking down her apartment door when she refused to answer me. Not realizing how far Armand had already taken her, Helen returned the pages feeling nauseated. Why did he come back now? Why is he trying to use me against you in the same way? Because he knew you were here. Because he saw an opportunity to repeat the pattern. To hurt me through another woman important to me. Victor looked at her directly. Helen, I didn't tell you immediately who you were to me, because I feared exactly this. That Armand would find out. That he would use you as he used Lucy. I wanted to get to know you first, let you get to know me before revealing the truth. And when were you planning to tell me? Tonight, he replied without hesitation. I went to Chicago to get something, actually. He took a sealed envelope from his pocket and handed it to her. The DNA test, which confirms, without a doubt, that I am your biological father. Helen looked at the envelope but didn't open it. She didn't need to. She already felt on some instinctive level that it was true. Perhaps she had always felt it since their first meeting, that inexplicable connection, that mutual recognition she couldn't name. "And now?" she asked finally. "Now the decision is yours." Victor approached but maintained a respectful distance. "You can pack your things and leave. Go back to your life, forget all this. I can guarantee your safety from a distance without interfering, or you can stay. Finish your work here, get to know your father, discover more about your mother, and help me protect what she valued most, the truth." Helen felt tears forming in her eyes. 27 years without a father. 20 years believing her mother had died in an accident. A lifetime built on absences, voids, half-truths. And now suddenly the opportunity to fill those spaces, to know her origins, to understand who she really was. But there was a price. Trusting Victor meant accepting that Armand was the villain of the story, that all his accusations were manipulations, calculated lies to sow distrust. What if she was wrong? What if Victor really was the monster Armand described? At that moment, as she hesitated, the library door burst open violently. Mrs. Eleanor entered, panting, her face pale with fear. "Mr. Victor!" "The house! Fire! Armand!" She had barely finished speaking when the smell of smoke invaded the library. Victor ran to the door, opening it to reveal a cloud of dark smoke advancing down the corridor. "The son of a bitch set the mansion on fire," he muttered before turning to Mrs. Eleanor. "Grab Helen. Get out through the back!" "Now, and you?" Helen shouted as the housekeeper pulled her arm. "I have to save the documents. The evidence." He was already running in the opposite direction, towards the core of the smoke. Helen hesitated only a second before breaking free from Mrs. Eleanor and running after Victor. She wouldn't let him face that alone, not after everything she had discovered, not knowing he was the only living connection she had to her mother. The corridor was already filled with smoke, making breathing and visibility difficult. Helen covered her nose and mouth with her sleeve, advancing towards the center of the house. Turning a corner, she almost collided with Victor, who was returning carrying a metal box. "What are you doing?" he yelled, clearly furious and frightened. "I told you to get out!" "I won't leave you," she yelled back. "I won't lose you like I lost my mother." Something changed in his gaze. Surprise, emotion, a vulnerability Helen had never seen before. Without another word, he grabbed her arm and led her through the smoke, along a path she didn't know, a narrow corridor, a hidden door, a secret passage that seemed to cut vertically through the structure of the mansion. Minutes later, they emerged in the back garden, breathless, covered in soot, but alive. Mrs. Eleanor was already there, along with the few servants who worked at the mansion. In the distance, sirens could be heard. The firefighters were on their way. The sight was apocalyptic. The historic mansion, with its hundreds of years of history, was now an inferno of flames licking the night sky. The center of the structure had already collapsed, taking with it the library, the heart of the house. "Why?" Helen murmured, tears cutting clean trails on her soot-stained face. "Why would he do this?" "Because he couldn't have you," Victor replied simply. "Nor me, nor the truth." He lifted the metal box. "But he failed. The most important documents are here. The evidence against him, the records of what really happened to Lucy, to your mother, everything we need to finally expose him." Helen looked at the man beside her, her father, trying to reconcile all the versions of him she had known in recent days. The cold, calculating businessman, the brother tormented by guilt, the lover who never overcame loss, the father who watched his daughter from a distance, afraid to approach. All were facets of the same complex man. All were true in their own way. "And now?" she asked, feeling strangely calm despite the chaos around her. "What do we do?" Victor turned to her, the fire reflected in his dark eyes so similar to hers. "Now we finish what your mother started. Together." That night, as the mansion burned to its foundations, Helen Vance finally found what she had been looking for her entire life without knowing. Her origins, her history, her truth. And Victor Davies, after decades carrying the weight of guilt and loneliness, found redemption in the daughter he had never been able to openly acknowledge. Armand Leon was found days later, trying to flee the country. The documents saved by Victor, combined with the testimony of Helen and Mrs. Eleanor, were enough to finally bring him to justice, not only for the arson, but for the decades-old crimes that had gone unpunished for too long. Angela's death remained partially a mystery. Evidence pointed to Armand as responsible for her murder, but without confession or conclusive proof, all that remained was the certainty that she had died trying to protect her daughter and expose the truth. A year later, Helen was on the terrace of the new apartment she shared with her father in Tribeca, watching the sunset over the sea. Victor approached, offering her a glass of wine. "The last restored books arrived today," he commented. "The new library is almost complete." Helen smiled. The decision to rebuild the collection of historical documents had been made jointly, a project that had brought them even closer in the months following the tragedy. "Mom would be proud," she said softly. "Of both of us," Victor nodded, emotion visible in his eyes. "She was always the strongest of us. The bravest. I think I inherited that from her." Helen touched the sapphire ring she now wore daily. "But I also inherited things from you, your determination, your loyalty, and my stubbornness," he added with a rare smile. "No doubt." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the colors of the sky change, day slowly giving way to night. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who, after much suffering and many secrets, finally found peace in shared truth. Helen thought of everything that had happened, how her life had completely changed in a few months. She had lost a lot. The innocence about her past, the security of a simple identity, even her virginity, which now seemed an irrelevant detail compared to the much deeper transformations she had experienced. But she had gained much more: a father, a story, an understanding of who she was and where she came from, and, most importantly, she had gained the freedom that only comes when the ghosts of the past are finally confronted and accepted. "What are you thinking about?" Victor asked, noticing her distant gaze. Helen smiled, turning to face the man who, despite all the mistakes and secrets, had risked everything to save her, not just from the fire, but from a lifetime based on lies. "I'm thinking about how strange it is," she replied. "I spent my whole life feeling incomplete, searching for something I couldn't name. And now, after so much pain and so much truth, I finally feel whole." Victor nodded, perfectly understanding what she meant. He too felt that way, finally complete, finally at peace.